Yeah, Murray.
There's three of us fit that bill, Shane.
Okay, I can see now.
Looks like we're online.
Everybody.
If you look at your image, Murray, you've got the clock.
Kia ora everyone, and welcome along to our meeting, 8th of April, Selwyn District Council. Second meeting that we're going to be having online today. Welcome along to anyone that's viewing this on the council Facebook page. We will run through the meeting agenda that's here. So we've been a little bit late in starting. We couldn't get the stream up live on Facebook in time for 1 o'clock. And we have just discussed whether or not we'll actually stream these from and hold our meetings from 2 p.m. From next week, just to allow those that may want to watch the updates from the government around the COVID situation that happened at 1 to do that before we start our meeting at 2 p.m. We'll kick off with the council affirmation. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the Selwyn citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions, so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of the Selwyn District and its communities. We will. And the council karakia, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina ki ngā ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he hio, he huka, he hohu, ti hei mauri ora. So welcome along to this meeting. We had an executive meeting last week with the changes around government legislation now allowing us to hold full council meetings not in the same room as one another. Our scheduled council meetings will continue weekly, but at 2 p.m. As I've said, and there'll be no need to continue with the executive meetings. This will also mean that audit and risk will be able to get back underway. But at the moment, today's agenda does cover some audit and risk matters that would have otherwise have gone there, and there'll be discussion on those, particularly the finances, a little later on in the meeting. I have no apologies from anyone received for the meeting. I believe we're all online today. Is there any identification of extraordinary general business that's not currently on the agenda? None. We moved, or any conflicts of interest that haven't already been registered on the conflicts register? And none. Move to the confirmation of minutes from Wednesday the 25th of March that Selwyn District Council held in our chambers just before lockdown, that we confirm the minutes of that ordinary meeting. Do I have a mover? Moved Councillor Lyle, seconded Councillor Bland. Is there any discussion on that?
I have submitted an amendment of clarification to the item around the draft annual budget consultation document.
Thanks, Mark. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, declare it carried. And I understand we're not going to be able to hear everyone say aye, so you don't have to take your microphones on and off, but if you just raise your hand at the voting time, that way I can see and count if I need to. So it'll be all those in favour say aye, raise your hand, all those in favour, raise your hand at that point, and we'll just do a count up if it's close. Item number 2 is on pages 18 through 21 of the agenda, and it's the meeting of the executive meeting that we held via Zoom last week. Is there a mover that we received those minutes? Councillor Lemon and Councillor Mugford. Is there any discussion on those minutes?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Councillor Alexander.
There appears to be a missing question that I asked regarding the continued low-level chlorination of the Koiwi water supply has been omitted from the minutes. I can't find it. And the undertaking that I would have an answer by this meeting is also missing, and I haven't actually had a satisfactory answer to that question as to why that's continuing.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can respond to that. Mark, if you just check your inbox, I flicked you Murray's comments about a quarter of an hour ago, and he will be available to answer ongoing questions about that.
Great, and we also have water services update as part of the agenda today, and if the answer hasn't been there for you, Mark, and you feel that there needs to be some other explanation, you can ask Murray England if he's presenting that report today. Under matters currently requiring attention, the implementation of district-wide rates for community centres and halls is due to come was due to come back to us. That's now on hold. The first report that we have is pages 20 through 28. It's a joint district licensing committee and licensing inspector. And Tim Harris, do you have anything that you want to say at this point around that agenda item?
No, I don't. No.
Councillors, do I have a mover that we received that report? Moved Councillor Alexander, seconded Councillor Lyle. Is there any further discussion on this matter?
Just before you go off, Sam, can you hear me?
Yes.
I did push a wee button that had a yellow waving hand. I just wanted to make it clear that I have a conflict of interest in this item. It just seems to be a bit slow in actually tracking through to you.
That's fine, Deborah. Thanks for telling us that. And we're aware that you have that conflict. It's already on our ongoing conflicts register, and there's no need for you to tell us at each meeting, but thank you for highlighting it again for us today. There been no further discussion on that matter. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, please raise your hands. Declare it carried. The next item on the report, the next item on our agenda, sorry, is the Mayor's report, and I have some things to update you on. And I've written them down just to make sure that I cover off. There's been a lot going on, obviously, and I didn't want to miss some things. So I'll just give you an update of where we're at. I've also asked Al Lawn to update us today. He is the Civil Defence Manager, and obviously our CEO David Ward will be giving an update as well. But as we approach week 3 of lockdown, we've got nothing but praise and thanks to offer our community for the way they've risen themselves to the challenges presented by these exceptional times. Each day, I do hear more stories of how individuals, community groups, emergency services, supermarkets, pharmacies, and many others are pulling out all the stops with numerous acts of generosity and resilience across Selwyn. We're doing everything we can within our power to keep our community safe and to keep essential services that we rely on in place. Our emergency operations centre is fully operational, and our council staff have now settled into a working from home routine. And I'm spending councillor hours and meetings with yourselves and also with other colleagues via video conferencing and working from home, which certainly has some upsides, but it's got some downsides too. Our current focus is on the near future, and through today's agenda, we're going to be discussing a 0% rates increase for next year, as well as options to assist families and businesses to delay the payment of their rates bills. We need to make these decisions in support of our community through the next period of uncertainty to ensure that life in Selwyn can pick up once again once the lockdown is over. And I look forward to the discussion that we'll have on those items later. Our council is in a very strong financial position. We have continually reminded ourselves of that. And so we're able to implement some short-term but necessary decisions without long-lasting financial burden. And it's important that we do take a long-term view of the decisions that we continue to make. We need to take responsibility for the decisions today by ensuring we balance it through the long-term plan, and that will be developing that over the next 12 months. And hopefully that we'll have far more certainty as we develop that plan than we do now. A Selwyn recovery plan is necessary, and many of us are thinking about that at the moment. The plan needs to be driven from the ground up and reflect the spread of our community. In developing the plan, we need community, runanga, business, NGO, and our neighbour councils to have input. We've got strong relationships with all these groups, which is the basis of any discussion that we have. We don't have to rush the plan. We don't have to start major discussion. We don't have to form it right now. We certainly don't have to start implementing it immediately. However, we do need all of our partners involved if we're going to make the most of the opportunity that COVID-19 is presenting us for our future. This work with everyone will inform our planning and funding for our long-term plan. And although today's focus is on the annual plan, I want to signal that our long-term plan year 1 will likely look very different than the current long-term plan year 4. And with that in mind, I'm assuming that our large capital projects will be completed over the next 12 months. I'll be working with our staff and councillors to understand other approaches to the development of long-term plans and just see how others do that, looking at what different councils have done and are looking to do into the future, and ensuring that we start by asking questions rather than starting with a status quo. It's certainly a time of change. As chair of the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, I'm working with other mayors with an eye on the longer term as well. Working together with our neighbours and partners is the best way to respond to the inevitable challenges that will face our hard-pressed, particularly local businesses. We're looking at how the lack of international travel will affect tourism and the many farmers who rely heavily on overseas workers to support their industry. Yesterday, I met with some of our tourism providers here in Selwyn and key staff that work within our organisation with them to hear how they were faring. And there's certainly some challenges ahead, but like most people I talk with, while there is immediate uncertainty, there is long-term hope. Our tourism operators will change and evolve to meet the needs of New Zealanders travelling the country and visiting our towns. Last year, there were 20 million separate visits to TAs of the South Island. 18 million of those were New Zealanders, putting pressure on our roads and public toilets. So once lockdown is over, there'll still be plenty of activity around our island, even without our international visitors for a while. The hard part, though, is that the international visitors accounted for 45% of total visitor spend. So operators are going to need to find ways to provide extra value to Kiwis that are travelling around. There were areas of international tourism industry, though, that were unhealthy, and we need to ensure that what we pick back up is high value, not high volume, that our communities see the benefit of visitors and invite the activity, and that our island as a whole benefits. We also want to make sure that we can smooth our current seasonality, which varies wildly between January and July for most places. The Mayoral Forum has been advocating to the government to clarify essential services for food businesses. And in Selwyn, and particularly in Leeston and Darfield, there's been a lot of pressure on a single small to medium-sized supermarket. Their business continuing is extremely important, and the recent announcement by the Prime Minister that butchers and greengrocers are able to deliver following best practice social distancing rules is very welcome, and that certainly helps share the load. It also means that the food being grown can make it to market rather than going to waste. We're asking the government also about weekly newspapers who are currently unable to work as essential services, but who share most of the local news across Selwyn. The Selwyn app and Selwyn Times usually attend all of our meetings and report the discussion to our community. Some of these papers have online versions, although online does not work for everyone in Selwyn. The Selwyn app is an online only tool, and you're able to see updates and continue to share news in that way. On Monday this week, I met virtually with leaders from over 40 different community organisations and committees in Selwyn to understand their needs and to communicate what our council are doing. We confirmed with them that funds they had received from council for the current financial year would be held and could be spent into the next year. That the review of community committee structure that had been begun is now on hold as far as council work streams go. However, just because now is not the right time to consider those sorts of changes, but we do want them to consider how they meet, when they meet, how often they meet, and who they meet with, because there's a time now for that organic change to be questioned and for them to implement some changes around how they do it locally. And many communities in Selwyn have already joined their hall or their reserve or their township committee meeting together. We'll put on hold the reserve charging work that a reserves team has been looking at. And these work streams, they'll get back online once we get through this current crisis and out of lockdown. But at the moment, it's not the time to add extra uncertainty to what people are currently feeling. The feedback from this group was that they appreciated the opportunity to gather. For many, it was their first taste of an online meeting. We plan to hold these catch-ups monthly, although some feedback suggested a shorter time frame, which we'll consider. And it was good to have some councillors join us for that meeting as well, and acknowledge that not everyone was able to do that. Like you, I'm still in my bubble, which includes Liz, Elliot, and my parents living with us. We'll be staying local this Easter, and just encourage you to all do the same and to follow the guidelines that the government continues to put out. We're halfway through what was initially talked about as being a 4-week lockdown. It may go longer. We don't want it to, and it's really important that if we can maintain lockdown now and social distancing when we do go shopping to the supermarket or pharmacy, we put ourselves in the best position to get out of this as soon as we can. We're not out of the woods yet, though. And we are all in this together, sharing the experiences of being stuck at home for extended periods of time with those around us who we love. So please stay safe and listen to the advice of the government and continue to be kind to one another. That kind of covers off most of the key activities for me over the past week, and I'm happy to take any questions, which I can do now. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Al Lawn, our Civil Defence Manager, to give you an update on operations from his side, and to be able to talk a little bit about the response and some key messages that's coming out to our community as well. So if anyone's got any questions for me, we'll take those now before we move on to Al. Any hands up? Then yes, Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, question from community committees. Some had postponed their triennial meetings to await the outcome of this review. Should they now be holding those meetings?
That's something we're going to need to consider with them. It's pretty hard to hold a triennial meeting and gathering and hold voting all online. So I'm not suggesting that we push that at the moment. And I think that holding off and allowing them to continue under the current structure until we get out of lockdown and at least down to alert level 2, so that some form of working together is able to happen in person and possibly back down to alert level 1 and completely through this, we need to provide that guidance to the market. So thank you for bringing that up, and we'll provide that clarity back to committees. David Wood, have you got any advice there?
You've probably, the last bit is what I was going to say, but I concurrent to everybody else got that same question last night, and there's a staff meeting organised for tomorrow morning to discuss the response and to provide the advice back to the committees, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mark. Any further questions? I'll hand over now to Al Lawn, our Civil Defence Manager. Al, thanks for joining us in the meeting today, and if you can just give us an update of where we've been at over the past 7 days and what we're facing at the moment, and some of the activities you see going on for you and your team.
Okay, just so I know, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent. I'll say similar to what I said to the those who were in the committee meeting, the meeting to the committees the other day. So if it's the same thing, I apologise for those who were in that. Just to give some background, we stood up the Emergency Operations Centre at the Lincoln Country Club, and the reason for that was it's more isolated. It kept us away from the management and those people who were at HQ, and it means we could...
Sorry, I hate to interrupt you. It's just very hard to see you and your head. We can see from your nose down. Are you able to just change your camera just for those of us watching? Great.
Is it better?
Thank you very much.
It's probably a better look anyway without my face. Yeah, we stood up the EOC. We've created a bubble, so there are very few operating in the EOC, and we have a number of staff, 10 or more, working virtually via Zoom meetings and via our D4H platform, which is a tasking platform and gives us a really good overview of what is happening. We do have backup staff, so those who can take over if we got crook in here. So we have 3 backup controllers and other functional managers, so we can keep going. One of the key components of our response is our 35 community response teams. So they are local people in their local areas doing stuff locally. It is a blueprint for New Zealand. It is fantastic. And in this situation, they are the people who are doing the majority of our response into our communities. And that is part of the reason why we have only had 10 calls so far to our 0800 number, which is the number the government told us we had to stand up and man from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock in the evening, 7 days a week. So 10 calls, I believe, is a really, really good indication of what is happening in our community. We have tried to share that number widely, and we think it's good. The police are sharing it for us. A lot of other people are sharing it, and those CRT teams are going to next week drop a leaflet in the people's letterboxes who they think are a bit more vulnerable in the communities, and it'll have all those local numbers and national numbers as well. We want to make sure people are linked in. Welfare is our key function. We're concentrating on making sure that we are using local resources. So we are feeding into our food banks. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. At the moment, their uptake is not huge in numbers, but we believe that that will go up from just listening to our community. The needs will rise. So we will be looking after those food banks. The government has told us that's what we should be doing. We also have staff supporting MSD who have struggled to cope with their workload, and they have asked TAs to supply staff to call over 70s living alone with no internet access. So they do a quick needs assessment and then they feed that back to MSD. We think that is part of being good humans and looking after those people in our communities. It is Canterbury wide, so they couldn't get it down to just Selwyn, but we believe that's also being good neighbours. So they are people that need those calls. We work under Canterbury Group, so the controller in Canterbury Group works under the national controller, and that's where we find our direction for a lot of stuff, but they do give us the autonomy to get local solutions for local problems. We do have contingency plans. Be assured that if the Alpine fault goes, we have a contingency for that and how that looks in a pandemic. Also the likes of flooding. That's about it. I am happy where we are. We are resourced well. We have a council that supports us, and we have an incredible community that looks after each other. So I'm heartened.
Thanks, Al. Can you just remind us all of the numbers and the contacts for people that need to get hold of you? What's the best lines of communication if anyone's watching this meeting today?
The 0800 Selwyn number, and off the top of my head, I don't know what the digits are, but it's 0800 Selwyn. If anybody has a need, that's where they should go to. If they have a particular, say it's a need for money from work and income, etc., put those through to the national numbers. And I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me, but they are on that COVID New Zealand website. That's a really good website to look at. So 0800 Selwyn, push that out there to anybody that has a need, and we can put them to where they need to go.
Thanks, Al. Are there questions from other councillors? I'll move that you receive my report and Al's briefing due today. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Nicole Reid. Any further discussion? Nicole, do you have something to say?
Sorry, I did have a question for Al. It might be, sorry if I missed it, but it might be, but do you know how many Freedom Campers left yesterday? Going out to Germany?
Not many. We've got more going out tomorrow, but our Freedom Camping numbers are reasonably static. I think off the top of my head, it might have been 5 that left, and we got 1 overnight.
It's interesting because there was quite a lot of planes came in yesterday. I was just, yeah, it's interesting to hear. Thank you.
There's more people on standby. I know of some on standby, so they may not have got on the flight, but there are a lot of hoping to go, and we actually hope they do go because it will reduce some of the needs that we see there.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, and Councillor McInnes.
I just wanted to say thank you to Al and his team for all their hard work, because there's got to be a lot, and it wasn't quite what anyone was expecting when you guys were making your plans, but you're doing a great job.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Great, and those numbers for, if you want them, is 0800 Selwyn, that's 0800 735 996, and the regional number, if you're watching this somewhere else, 0800 2424 11. So thanks, Al, for that. It's been moved and seconded that we received this report. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Declare it carried. Thanks, Al, for joining, and you probably won't stick around for the rest of the meeting. Ta.
No, I won't. Thank you.
I'll hand over to our CEO, David Ward, for his update to the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to focus on where we are in terms of response to the COVID situation. As you know, we've got a business continuity plan in place, which is assisting us with our organised response to the situation that we currently find ourselves in. We've established 2 pandemic response teams, and they rotate weekly, every Monday. Those teams are chaired by Tim and by Douglas, and it's currently Tim's team that's in the hot seat. The teams meet formally twice a day to consider and discuss how to respond to the current issues that they're facing themselves with. And I guess the one thing we're mindful of is the huge volumes of information that keep coming to us out of Wellington on a daily basis, and also from the local groups. And we learned fairly early on that to make quick decisions is often at our peril, because the information comes at us very quickly. And of course, the situation is changing rapidly on a daily basis. The organisation is in regular daily contact with all of our councillors. We receive formal reports in terms of their situation, and happily I can report that there are no issues that are causing any concerns in terms of continued provision of maintenance services for our essential services. Organisationally, we're starting to focus on quick response once the lockdown period ends, and that's around getting facilities open and fully operational as soon as we are able to. Second part of that is continuity of work on those major construction and infrastructure projects which are currently underway. And thirdly is reviewing our list of CapEx, planned CapEx programs to make sure that we maximise the opportunity for commencing work with the contracting community and for the benefit of our wider district as soon as the lockdown finishes. And of course, Council recognises that we have a huge role in reigniting our economy post-lockdown. I am incredibly proud of the response from all of our staff during the lockdown period. We continue to provide a wide range of services, from the essential services across the community through to the welfare calls that are being made. Al referred to some, and also our library staff, for example, finding the elderly members of our community and of the libraries just to check on their welfare and see how they're getting on. Also make them aware of the services that we are providing. And a reminder that we are open for business, so anybody needing to contact Council by telephone, email, snap, send and solve, just continue to do what you would normally do, and our customer services staff are on duty and will answer your questions. On a daily basis, I am in touch with all of our staff, either by email or by video, just bringing them up to date with what's happening around the organisation and some of our key response items. We've also established a staff Facebook page. There's over 260 odd staff members on that at the moment, and staff are keeping in touch with each other, sharing ideas, and it's just got a good feel to that page. As I said, the position we find ourselves in is regularly changing, but we've got a dedicated, experienced and agile staff who are providing great guidance, not only to the organisation, but also to the district as a district around us and dealing with the situations as they come to hand. So happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor, on that or any other issues that are happening around the district at the moment.
Thanks, David. Are there any questions from councillors? Does someone move that we receive David's report? Moved Councillor Lyle, seconded Councillor Bland. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you, David, for that. We move on to the Management Accountant Financial Report to 29th of February 2020. It's on pages 29 through 69 of your agenda. And I'll hand over to Greg to talk us through this report. This is a report that would normally come to the Audit and Risk Committee before it was here and would have that level of analysis. And I think it's important today that we run through this on a page-by-page basis with Greg, you providing the highlights as we run through. Hopefully, Therese, you're able to just follow what Greg is discussing so that we can keep any graphs or data on screen for the discussion too. And this might be one of those times when we think about how this runs for next time, and Greg, for you to understand screen sharing so that you can control what we're looking at as you speak to it. But Greg, I'll hand over you to take us through the report.
Thank you. So this report is a financial report to the end of February, which actually seems like ancient history to me now. But it also, I've added in some information about how the current pandemic may be impacting on us. I just want to refer to 2 pages on the report. The first is page 31, and then I'll just go back to page 30 on the pandemic. So first of all, page 31 is an overall view of our financial position to the end of February. So just to recap, the first column there is the year to date to the end of February. The second column is our budget for that period, and the third, the most interesting column, is the variance to date. So as I've been saying all year so far, that we're in a good position. Our revenues are up strongly there, so you can see in terms of different revenue lines, subsidies are above budget due to the level of roading maintenance. Our fees and charges are well ahead of budget, and that's in a number of areas, including environmental services, all our facilities, and a number of other areas as well. interest is above budget because of capital expenditure being behind budget, so we've got more cash in the bank in effect. So that shows that we're $4.9 million ahead of budget in terms of our revenue side.
Greg, can I just ask that you do share your screen? Therese doesn't have that in front of her, and just so that we're all on the same page following what you're discussing.
Let me just
Great.
check that you can see that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that's good. So yes, I'm looking down the middle column there, the variance column, and I've just got halfway down the page to application of operating funding, and that's our expenditure side. So in terms of payments to staff, we are underspent, which is due to staff vacancies, but we are overspent in relation to payments to suppliers. A lot of that is down to roading maintenance and some other maintenance areas, but also the cost of processing all the building consents, etc., which is reflected in the additional income above. So overall, we are overspent in terms of general payments. Also, would be even more overspent if we took into account that a number of our projects are haven't yet started or will be carried forward into next year. So the picture on the overspend side there would be slightly worse. So but that shows that overall we are underspent in our expenditure side by 792,000. That is overall we're $5.7 million ahead in terms of our operating position. As I say, to be a bit worse if we took into account the carry forward of our projects. Just going further down the page, the capital funding side, that's both land sales and contributions from developers. We're well ahead of budget there, and that's due to the high level of activity in the big subdivisions, particularly around Rolleston. On our capital expenditure side there, it shows that we've spent around about $42 million to the end of February against a budget of 63 million. So a bit behind on CapEx. We were just about to pick up in relation to the capital projects. All the very large capital projects are now underway, but for obvious reasons, they're now stalled a little bit. So unfortunately, although I was expecting CapEx to pick up, it won't be doing at the pace I was hoping it would. So overall, as I said, on this occasion, good financial position. I just wanted to go up the page to page 30 there, which is I just done a list, some initial thoughts on the impact of the pandemic on the council. There's a fair old list of areas where the pandemic would affect us. So that's in terms of reduced income in a number of areas, obviously community facilities, resource recovery park, possibly around building consents, etc. There will also be reduced expenditure in a number of areas as well, as obviously we're shut down in a number of areas, so some reduction in CapEx, in OpEx, particularly around certain costs, maintenance costs, etc., where we're not doing the work so much anymore. But a lot of the costs have continued, particularly around those essential services of water services, etc. Development contributions are likely to be substantially behind over the next few months for obvious reasons, as development is forced to slow down a little bit. So quite a few areas where there'll be less cash coming in, but the biggest single change will be less cash going out in relation to capital expenditure. I wanted to just give the council some reassurance though. We're in a very good financial position in terms of liquidity. I've listed there that we had, at the time I wrote this, $31 million in the bank, plus another $28 million worth of liquid funds. So that's almost $60 million of liquid funds available to the council. So it's really helpful at this point in time to have access to liquid funds at a time when credit markets might be less available. I just put together some rough thoughts around cash flows over the coming 3 months, but basically showing at the bottom of the page there that the inflow of cash is likely to be down, and that's going to be, both those general revenues, development contributions, possibly on rates, but our operating costs will also be down as well, offsetting that, and that our capital cash flows are likely to be substantially lower. So in actual fact, from a cash point of view, during the lockdown period, we're actually going to be in a much stronger position because we're actually not able to spend quite as much money. So just to reiterate there that we've got good position, we've got liquid assets, and we're able to keep services going and all those essential services going to the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Are there questions from councillors on anything that Greg has shared there? Yes, Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Greg, it just might be useful for those viewing and just to remind ourselves what our percentages of income rates present to us. You've summarised very nicely the impact of the COVID downturn on where it might impact us, but just so we get a flavour of what percentage rates contribute to our overall operating budget, our income essentially, and the likes of investments, income, leases, etc., and facilities operation and fees and charges, just as a bit of an idea for us.
Yes, thank you, Murray. So in general terms, we receive about $100 million worth of operating income. That excludes the more capital items of development contributions and vested assets. Of that $100 million, around about 2/3 or 64 million in this current year is rates related. So quite a substantial amount. The balance is made up of those items you mentioned, Murray, the fees and charges, about 17 million or so, and then dividends and lease revenue and interest, etc. So the security of having rates income means that in general terms we're in a good position, and the support of other incomes such as dividends, etc., is also very helpful to ratepayers in terms of minimising rates costs, etc. Thank you.
Greg, if I can ask you to take us through the rest of your report, starting with the graphs on page 32, and if councillors have any questions on any of the pages, we'll just hold those right till the very end, just so we're not jumping between speakers. But yeah, Greg, if you could do that and just highlight anything there that you think needs to be brought to our attention, rather than having the online conversation just gets a bit difficult if we're jumping between speakers. Thank you.
Yeah, so hopefully you can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Now. Yeah, so first up, democracy. Second, community centres, funding impact statements. Did you want me to comment at all, Sam, or just run down?
Yeah, if you can provide a brief comment, I think that's good for us to hear from you, rather than getting into a big discussion about it.
Okay, yeah, so not much to say on democracy. Community centres, I think the key is there that revenue up to this point was strong, obviously dropping away now, but it shows how well the facilities were doing this year and how busy they have been. Moving down to recreation reserves, the additional income there was down to additional funding in relation to tourist facilities. Library has been very active this year in terms of the numbers towards the bottom of the page, in terms of numbers of visits, etc., coming into libraries. They've been doing really well, really busy, and good control of their costs. Swimming pools, and particularly the aquatic centre, again well up in terms of fees, a little bit overspent, but there tends to be a close link between some of the costs and some of the fees there as we take on additional staff to meet the demand for lessons, etc. Township dividend spend there just down to general maintenance, not much income in that account. Building, etc., which includes just our general council buildings. Again, we've got a tourism grant there for toilet facilities, which is why we're ahead on income. Nothing much else to note. Community services just a little bit down on expenditure due to project work, really, which will probably be picked up on next year, I suspect now, given the current circumstances. Environmental services is interesting. It shows the huge busyness of that team over the first part of the year, and I think continuing at the moment. strongly up in terms of fees on both building and resource consenting sides. Some matching increase in costs to deliver that high level of service. And also remember that team is delivering on the district plan review, which is just slightly overspent as well, but huge workload for that team. Transportation, a key feature is the overspend there in terms of maintenance cost. So $2 million overspent on that payments to suppliers alone. That is matched by a slight lift in subsidy as well. In one sense, the current lockdown will help that overspend because we're able to do less of the more less urgent work. So it's only more urgent repairs to be done at the moment. So that overspend will reduce over the coming few months. Solid waste there, just a bit lower on income due to waste volumes, but there's a match between costs and income on that account. So income's down a bit, but so are costs in terms of waste volumes. And that's just that challenge of forecasting volumes at the start of the year. Water supply, nothing huge to say there, just some projects work being a little bit behind, meaning we've got an underspend. Wastewater there, a little bit overspent in terms of maintenance costs, a bit underspent in terms of projects. Stormwater, not much to add on that. Water races just underspends in terms of some of the maintenance and project costs. iZone, not a huge amount of activity at the moment. Obviously, we're just selling the last few sections on iZone, so we can see the year-to-date proceeds of $2.5 million. But obviously, that activity is winding down just as we sell the remaining sections. And then internal council services, which are essentially the internal staffing side of the council. We are underspent in terms of staffing and a little bit up there in terms of income, including limbs and penalties on rates due to late payment. And that's all the financial aspects of things. I don't know if you want to go through there's a lot of detail attached to the reports. Probably enough of that report.
That's good. Thank you, Greg, for taking us through that. There's a question from Councillor Alexander in relation to page 49.
Thank you. Greg, as you mentioned, iZone's winding down. We've only got a few sections left to spend. So for, this portion of this report likely not to be continued into the new financial year, as there'll be almost no activity and no significant funding impact?
Probably a fair comment. There's probably not a lot that we would want to report next year. I'm not sure if Douglas is online as to comment as to how many sections he would think will be left next year, but certainly it's probably a little point in reporting it as a separate page.
Thanks, Greg, for that. Douglas?
Yeah, we've got three lots without contracts on them currently, and as Councillor Alexander said, the only items the council maintain after 1 July are the reserves and the sites that we have not sold. So our workload is significantly less. We have asked all the property owners to take over their booms, and we're just working through the largest sites in terms of marketing issues.
Thank you. So it could become a line item on a different report, so we still can see where it's tracking, but it just doesn't need a full page to itself.
Correct.
Great. Any further questions from councillors? Councillors Gallagher and Epihar, happy to receive to move and second this report. Great. Any further discussion?
Yes, Sam, I just had are we going to talk about the KPIs in a moment to speak about them?
Yeah, you can do that now, Murray.
Yeah, just I guess it's just to be aware, obviously, that these are historic KPIs, and I imagine we will see a reduction in the coming reports on those from the simple fact that some of those cannot be maintained. Just to be aware of that, that it's not a reflection on their contractors essentially, but just the lockdown taking effect. And I guess the last comment to make is our projection for cash flow report, which was certainly true of February, may look entirely different when we get a next report, because those projected borrowing figures may indeed be radically different.
Yeah,
Thanks,
we
Murray.
could
Yes,
just add
Greg.
there that we will send out to councillors fairly shortly in the next few days, just an update to this report with our forecast at the end of June, just so you can get a better feel for the impacts, which I gave a fairly rough summary of earlier, but it'll give you much more information on what's actually likely to be happening over the coming 3 months.
Thank you, and good to see the KPIs over the last 12-month period showing, that our contractors are performing as we would expect them to on the measurables that are currently sitting there for those KPIs. Thanks, Greg. It's been moved and seconded by Gallagher and Epihar. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Declare it carried. The next item is on page 70 through 80. It's an update on Council Forestry Holdings, and the recommendation is that Council receives the report, update on Council Forestry Holdings for information, and hopefully Councillors McInnes and Hassan might be happy to move and second that, but we'll come to that. And if Mark Rikers is online, Mark, are you going to talk us through this report?
Yeah, I'm online, and I haven't really got much more to add to the report. It's just for information, and it's really just showing the position that we're at the moment in terms of the strategy to do our replanting program. So I don't really have much more to add in terms of that. It's just really an update of where we got to with that strategy to date.
Great. We've got a question from Councillor Mugford.
Yes, Mark, just where does the Colgate Reserve sit in with this? Because it's a woodlock and I see it's not on that list. So does that fit in somewhere?
That particular plantation there hasn't been included in terms of our forestry plantation. It's one of the ones that was done by the committee themselves, and it wasn't included in our initial submission in terms of the full forestry holding. So we haven't actually included that at this stage. It's treated more, I guess, as a part of a recreation reserve and a recreational asset.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
And Councillor Bland.
Yeah, hi. We're talking about the forestry holdings, and I understand that we have some 57 of them, probably in the size of 2 hectares. Is that correct?
Yeah, at the moment, that's actually the number we've got is about 47 sites. We did have 57 originally, but there's 10 sites that have been retired from that. Most of them are around 2 hectares. A lot of them are on the old gravel pit sites, so which are all 5-acre blocks or 2 hectares. There's 1 or 2 that are slightly larger, but most of them are that size.
And generally, we don't make much capital or gain from them. And what I was wondering, we're worrying about the emissions trading scheme. Why don't we look at something a little bit more differently and plant them out in native trees? And then we, obviously with the, I think it's Akariki or something, where the native birds are encouraged to fly across the district and do something a little bit more useful with these reserves that are actually not returning us a profit and maybe getting into the environment a little bit better. Have we thought about that?
Yeah, we have thought about that, and we are actually converting one of the sites down at Lakeside that was a former, at Lakeside Domain, which was a former forestry block. That's actually going to be planted in native species. And the problem is, and that's a site that's suitable for it, is that under the MPI guidelines, it's really difficult to get native forest to meet the stocking requirements on the sites. And to achieve the sort of coverage in that to meet the ETS requirements. So most of the dryland sites on the plains are not really suitable for that because they don't achieve the sort of height and the coverage that that you can get to prevent having to pay the ETS credit. So we have looked at that on a site-by-site basis. So the ones that are suitable we're definitely looking at that as a possibility. And as I said, we've done that on Lakeside, which is a wetter site.
The environment that we live in at the moment is that we were trying to encourage a little bit of lateral thinking and create work, and it would seem to me that this would be a really good opportunity to perhaps not worry too much about the financial cost of the ETS, and we could perhaps get one of the local nurseries or something like that to look at what would grow in these lots, because there will be native plants that would have grown in times gone by, and perhaps you could have someone, you know, like we could organise or tend for one of the local nurseries to tend these things, work out what plants are required and do something a little bit different. It just seems like a dreadful wasted opportunity to me.
Yeah, yeah, as I said, we are looking at that, so that's a possibility. And also on some of the other sites that we've got that can't be the former gravel sites and those sort of things that we've done a rehabilitation on, that's another possibility to use them for either community or recreation purposes. And we've got a couple of proposals sort of sitting in the wings at the moment in terms of a future use of a couple of those sites. So yeah, it's certainly something that we are looking at. We are a bit committed to the ones that we've already got in the scheme, because which was a total of 108 hectares, and that was mandatory for us to become part of that, because they were pre-1989 forests when they bought that scheme in. So just to give you an idea of the magnitude of cost, if we were to get out of that, it would cost us about 1.3 million at the moment, based on the ETS credits that we're holding. So it's not an insignificant amount, but we're certainly trying to, where we can, look for opportunities, and certainly native planting is one of those.
Thanks for that.
Councillor Hassan. Is there anybody else that has a question for Mark Rikus?
Can you hear me, Sam?
I can now, Deborah. Yes, you got a question for Mark?
Sorry, I just lost for a moment. I'm on safe driving mode, so you can't see me. Just with regards to what Councillor Bland has said, there are specialised dryland species that has been looked at under the Selwyn, Waihora and the West Melton Water Zone Committees and the Christchurch Water Zone Committees, and there is some planting being undertaken by ECAN with regards to particular species. Kofi is one that comes to mind. That was a lot of it on the dryland plains that has disappeared. Is there an opportunity to keep our forestry, but also to plant natives around the outside of that forestry for compatibility, and still keep our emissions trading options open?
Mark.
Yeah, no, that's a possibility. Although we do have restrictions now because of the national environmental standards for forestry, which require a gap in terms of setback from neighbouring properties, roads, and all these sorts of things. So you will actually see that a lot of the new plantings, there is actually quite a bit more space, and that's to stop the effects of shading on road and those sorts of things, and creating issues with neighbouring properties. So I guess we could plant them in sort of low species, that sort of thing. That's a possibility, and you know, we are looking at other sites in terms of potential dryland planting as well. Some of the existing gravel reserve sites. But as I said before, one of the problems is that it's really, really difficult to achieve the sort of coverage to offset the ETS requirements.
Thanks for the discussion, and just to confirm, I guess, Mark, the work that's already going on, you really are wanting to ensure that we don't increase our liability around the ETS, but we're also conscious of working with our neighbours and understanding what ECAN is doing and planting in this space, as well as the NGOs and Te Ara Kakariki, as has been mentioned, but are also doing a great work at planting across the district. So this isn't just about what we're doing, but this is what our part in the context of the wider picture of forestry and changes in land use across Selwyn. Is someone happy to move the report? Lemon and Hassan. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against, please raise your hand. Declare it carried. Thanks, Mark, for that. The next item is item number 6. It's on pages 81 through 104, and I invite Tim Harris to talk us through that the council receives a report on risk register for its information. Tim.
Good afternoon, councillors. Nice to see you all. This report would normally go before the Audit and Risk Committee, but obviously that meeting didn't happen, so it's been included in this agenda. There's 2 changes, additions to the risk register. One is to do with accreditation, and in the report I say that there's we hadn't at that stage of writing the report hadn't received accreditation. I'm pleased to say that last week we did receive full accreditation for the building consent authority, so that can be removed off that risk register. So well done to the team for achieving that. The other item, there is no surprise, it's the COVID-19 pandemic issue. And it just shows you how fast this has moved. I wrote this report on the 10th of March, and I included it as a possible outcome with a significant risk level. And 2 weeks later, we were in lockdown. So it moved very fast, and obviously that risk probably needs to be upgraded somewhat in terms of the impact it has on councils' services and activities. Other than that, that's all I've got ready to say. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, thanks for that report, Tim. As you say, it should normally have come through to our Audit and Risk Committee, and take on board your comments that obviously it's a very fast-moving situation. It's good to see, and thanks to you and your team for and our predecessors on audit and risk for including a risk register and having that available. I guess the only comment I will make now is, in light of the threat of COVID, I guess this is to you, Tim, and to Chief Executive, that maybe we include this as a monthly report instead of the bi-monthly report we were going to have to audit and risk, just so we can keep on top of these things. Is that something you see as being able to be achieved, Tim?
Yes, certainly. I think we're thinking about having an extra page just devoted to COVID in terms of the multiple risks that includes. So only happy to commence that work this week. So only too happy to include a report on a monthly basis with an expanded part of the risk register devoted to COVID-19.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from councillors? Someone happy to move that we receive this report? Councillor Lemon, Councillor Mugford. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Declare it carried. The next item is on page 114 through 124, and it's a major projects financial update. And Douglas or Craig, I'll hand to you to take us through the report. Thank you.
Craig, do you want to perhaps lead through, and I'll take any specific questions as Murray Washington will.
Okay, hang on just with me. I didn't do the Compass course on screen sharing, so hang on, give it a go. Hang on. Doesn't look like I can.
We believe in you, Craig.
Guess someone's got to.
We can see it.
Can you see it?
Oh, we could. You just dropped it again.
Oh, okay. Look, probably it'll take me a bit of time to get this sorted out. So hang on.
Through the mayor, I'm quite happy to share the screen. I've got the report on my. I can share the screen and drive through it, Craig, and you can speak to it.
That sounds
That'd be good, Tim. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, if we just proceed to page 115, Tim. These are the projects that we're now reporting on. At the top there, Foster Park, Selwyn Aquatic, Rolleston Town Centre, which encompasses TRRT, roading infrastructure, retail. And then we've got the Health Hub Pines wastewater, solar drying hall, Lowe's Road, Tennyson Street signals, recovery park enhancements, and potentially the Lincoln Reservoir. We just key on down to the first graph we've got there is where we are over the whole of the projects, and you can see where the graph is flattening. I imagine Jacinta Ardern would like to see COVID-19 doing that, but it does indicate that we are well behind on what we anticipated where we'd be. The red line is where what has been approved by council, and the green line is where we thought we'd be. But I'm anticipating that we will pick up tremendously after this lockdown comes off. Next page, Tim. The first graph is on indoor courts, a big project. And from this report, you can see we're well ahead of where we're supposed to be. And in all the commentary here, any new commentary I've put in red so that we don't have to read through the whole lot. So currently we're ahead of the program. The biggest risk at the time of writing this report was the fact that products and componentry could be delayed due to the virus. That is a definite now. Next one is the Selwyn Aquatic. That is going to be faced with the same problems. We are doing very well on the construction side of the new pool, and it was deemed it will be finished by the end of December. But this will be delayed now because, and the maintenance probably will be delayed because a lot of the componentry is once again coming out of Europe, and that is a possibility of being delayed as well. The good news about it is that we're not spending any money on variations, so and the additional maintenance is also well under budget at the present time. So that just shows you in the status side of the things here, the only risk to the construction is the supply of componentry. Risk to maintenance, the supply of componentry, and probably price increases, which were not foreseen at the time. So, but we'll know more about that once we start to get information out of Europe. The Rolleston Town Centre, it's behind budget, but it's behind the curve where we thought we'd like to be, but they tell me it's on track with practical completion scheduled for around about June 2021. The foundations have been completed, and if anyone, you can't go down to the reserve, but they make quite a nice little box pattern on the ground. Facade testing is underway, and we may have to increase the steel size to meet standards. The risk, once again, is supply of componentry. There has been the potential to swap out items for those which are more accessible, but this is a costly exercise, and we're being asked by the same people to purchase now rather than later. But we could actually run into warranty issues because we'll own them probably for a year before they actually get installed. So that becomes a high risk for us as well. But the staff are managing that very well. Tennyson Street upgrade. This project was going very well because we went into an accelerated phase by which we totally closed Tennyson Street and introduced night work. They were 2 weeks ahead of schedule. And we're well on track to complete it in June. Now that's completely gone by the wayside. There's a picture on their latest report that the actual street is looking very nice as they secured it before the lockdown. But that will now finish up being behind schedule, or behind when we needed it to be. The first, these Isaacs are prepared to get into there. As soon as the lockdown comes off, they will be back in there within 2 to 3 days. yes, there's just all that, as I say, this report was written early March, so a lot of these comments now are a wee bit out of date, particularly like the reserve car park completed by the end of July. That won't happen now. The town square, that's just a placeholder here because it's only incurring fees. Rolleston Town Centre retail discussions are ongoing with potential developers, but we've got to look at the potential downturn which may affect tenants from actually shifting out here. So that's we've got to take that all under advisement. The recovery park, it's in 2 stages. Stage 1's underway and we completed by the 30th of June, would have been. Stage 2 is commenced in design in the first quarter of 2021, and that'll be completed by June 2021. Once again, COVID-19 will play its part in being able to get various tenants or services. Lowe's Road, Tennyson Street lights, that's progressing with the water race piping between Bronte Way and Lowe's Road having been completed. Relocation of services and the preparation of a new curb and channeling. The contract period is from the 17th of February through to the 28th of May, probably get delayed now till 28th of June. We do have risks here because once again importing product such as lighting, luminaries and any other offshore material. The Lincoln Reservoir, contractors were established on site and construction of the reservoir pump station was to be completed July-August 2020, probably looking at a delay there of 2 months as well. Pine Solar Drying Hall, that's only in the design stage at the moment, and we would expect that to be completed while during this lockdown, and don't foresee any reasons why the construction part of it shouldn't commence in July, but we'll just wait and see. The manufacturing, the risk here, the manufacturing and supply of sludge mining equipment, mixing equipment, is in Germany, so that could be delayed as well. We have paid 40% deposit with the balance due on shipment. Health Hub, this one's ongoing. We just actually got contractors on site in early March for a 12-month build, and then a 3 to 6 months tenancy fit out, which would be parts of it would be concurrent with the 12-month build. While the revenue forecast was due to commence July 2021, that will be possibly delayed now. We've got two key tenants already signed up, representing that 58.7% of the lettable space. And the risks, once again, of products, componentry could be delayed, and the economic downturn, prospective tenants reluctant to commit to tenancies. These are the tenancies such as GPs and any other small pharmacies, etc. But time will tell. Thanks. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Craig, and Tim for showing us through that. Douglas, did you have anything you wanted to add to that report at this stage?
Thanks, Sam. Not to what's in the public, but I do want to comment in public scrutiny on a couple of issues, give an update there. But yeah, it is obviously unfortunate where we sit, because we certainly think Tennyson Street would be complete. So yeah, we'll comment on Tennyson Street and Health Hub in public scrutiny part of the report.
Thank you. Craig, I thought you might have been onto an investment opportunity there with sludge mining rather than sludge drying, but you know, whether that's something that you've just been working away quietly on.
Yeah.
I had a question just around the facade of Te Ara Atia, and you mentioned the need to increase steel. Is that you know, is that a design flaw? Who's going to carry the cost around, you know, the misidentification of something at that level?
Good question, Sam. We're busy trying to find that out as well. At the moment, we're just trying to get the facade tested and up to specification. Then we'll be doing the arguing with the designers, etc.
That's cool. My assumption would be that it's not a cost that we would bear. We've had paid professionals to design this building for us and to use materials and to think through the engineering of, and then we have entered a contract with them. So yeah, be interesting just to see where that discussion goes. Douglas Marshall.
That's our stance as well.
Yeah, just to concur, Your Worship, yeah, we did have the facade tested months ago in terms of design. So yeah, your approach is our approach.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor McInnes.
I've just got a quick question around the machinery coming in from Germany. Just thinking, aside from the delay on potentially on it being manufactured, is it something that requires people like engineers to come in from Germany to help install and start and everything? And because potentially we're going to have issues with immigration and quarantine periods and that sort of thing for quite some time that could add in.
That's correct. We have to address all of these problems at the present time. Is Murray Washington online?
Yep.
Because you might know more about that particular side of it than what I do, Murray.
Yeah, I think Sophie's quite right, actually. The first solar drying hall was designed as effectively a proprietary design out of Germany, and the whole setup was done with assistance from German engineers. I suspect there will be a requirement for them to come in, but given that design is not due to be complete for a few months and then construction after that, I suspect we should be, hopefully, we'll all be back to normal by then.
Thanks, Murray. Any further questions for staff on this matter? Someone moved that we receive this report. Councillor Lemon, Councillor Alexander. All those in favour, please say aye. Or raise your hand, should I say? Thank you. All those against, please raise your hand. Declare it carried. The next item is actually item 7, page 105 through 113. And we move to Murray England or Murray Washington, whoever's going to take us through the water services and water delivery update. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship and councillors. In introducing this report, which is just an update on last month's report, and obviously we've highlighted in red the changes, but firstly I'd like to introduce Elaine, if you're on screen or can come on screen. Elaine is our newly appointed Water Services Delivery Manager. She's been working for us on secondment from Jacob for a number of months. She's only just been appointed in the last 2 weeks, so I can't even confirm what her exact start date is. So she's not actually a staff member quite yet, but she's going to bring a lot of skill to our group. Now, thanks, Murray. I think you've put that up. As I said, do you want us to go through that, or do you have any particular questions that you would like to ask of Murray, Elaine, or myself?
Well, kia ora, Elaine, and welcome on board, even if it's a slight delay and you're really joining us. Thanks for the work that's gone into this to date. I think it's good if you could take us through the report, Murray or Elaine, whoever is going to do that, and then we'll have some questions from councillors at the end. Thank you.
Okay.
Murray.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be able to see your faces virtually. So I'll run you through the report. Just go back to that Pines comment about the sludge managers. Interesting enough, the commissioning of the last stage was actually done a lot remotely. And so CCTV cameras were set up and our German counterparts were able to log in online, generally at night with lights they could activate as well, and could optimize our systems and then log out by 4 the day broke the next morning. So a lot of it can be done remotely, which is great. The report we have, like Craig's one previously, used red font where we've made changes. So this is a report we went through last month with you, and I've got some updates. So the first one is, I'm reading now page sort of 105, 106, section 3.1, potable water safety. Because of the lockdown, our water safety plan preparation has potential to be delayed. And so we have written to the District Health Board requesting an extension of time for that work. The main reason is that it's a collaborative process. We want to be able to have our contractor in the room to work us through that analysis of risks for each supply. And although we can do that online like we are now, it does make things a little bit harder. So we have asked for that time extension. We've heard back since this report, and that time extension won't be given. And so we're now working through ways to move forward. I would just note, and perhaps cheekily, that extension of time has been given to our drinking water assessors to review the reports, just not to us to write them. Moving on quickly, I think is appropriate to demand management. Obviously now with the cooler weather, demand has dropped. What is interesting, and maybe it's a bit geeky, but watching what happens with different water uses with people being at home. So potentially at our next report, we can show you how that's changed, but instead of seeing the peak in the morning and in the evening, we suspect we'll probably see a high demand during the day as people change their habits.
Can I just comment on that, Murray? The last week, we are down to winter level for total consumption. So that's actually quite interesting that we've dropped down very quickly.
Yep, no, that is so. One of the questions we had at the last council meeting was regarding water loss, and so we've written a little section here. Council carries out a water loss assessment on our water supplies each year, and that's reported as part of our annual report. For our large townships, Starfield 22.1%, Leeston 11%, Lincoln 9%, almost 10%, Preelton 11%, and Rolleston 9%. So that's percent of water. We look at the total amount of water we put into the network, and then what percentage of that is sold, and then the difference is lost with a few other calculations in there. I've got a number of quotes I've written here, and I'll just scroll up the page, hopefully that's coming up. But we're part of a benchmarking process with Water New Zealand, and one of their quotes we took from the report, the recent one, is on screen now. So only 5 participants, and they're listed here with Selwyn underlined, achieve water loss levels low enough that further reduction of losses would be considered uneconomic. So when you look at those results, 10% does appear to be high, and some schemes are even higher than that. But that also takes into account things like firefighting practices where we have hydrants opened up. It might be developers where they've taken water for dust suppression and things like that. So there's a whole lot of reasons why those numbers are the way they are. Generally speaking, if I just scroll back up the page, some of our highest ones, Castle Hill, 68% of our water is lost, which of course sounds extremely alarming. But if you can imagine, the smaller the supply, you only need a very small leak, which makes it a huge loss. So for example, a dripping urinal in Castle Hill could actually be quite a large amount of water compared to what that community would normally consume. So everything needs to be taken into balance. Moving down, capital projects, and Craig's spoken a lot about this. One of the good news is that our Halpert water treatment plant was brought online on the 24th of March. That's the day of the shutdown, or just before. So that water supply site is now up and running, and adds a potential 300 litres per second to our Rolleston water supply. Due to obviously the shutdown, work on other growth-related projects has been paused. And this is the same if I'm scrolling down further to our water treatment plants, which are also on hold at the moment. No change to the water regulator section. Three Waters review, and Murray might want to add to this one. Murray, do you want to speak to this, or? No,
No. All I'll say is that we're still waiting. We have heard nothing from the DIA, and we expect that maybe they've been consumed by other matters in the meantime. But we'll be following up in the next week or so to see where everything's at.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll move on down. So Upper Sound Huts, we lodged the resource consent to continue our current discharge while we go and design future upgrades for that scheme in consultation with the hut owners down there. On the 1st of April, Environment Canterbury has provided confirmation that they've granted a section 124 continuance for the wastewater discharge. So in simple terms, what that means is that we can carry on under our current rights to discharge until the consent application is either declined or granted. which gives us some certainty for the huts until we get that revised consent for the medium-term solution to be approved. We have just flagged here that we are trucking away excess volumes of wastewater above what our consent allows us to discharge. Be it over the summer period, we don't have that as an issue, but over winter, when we have inflow infiltration, higher groundwater levels, we do need to truck away some excess wastewater to keep within consent limits. This has caused some tension with the ratepayers down at the huts, and we just want to draw that to your attention there. Eastern Selwyn Sewage Scheme, the upgrade works there. The comment is probably supposed to be up at the first paragraph, but the Pines upgrade works have been put on hold, be it all the design works continue as we are in lockdown. Treatment plant upgrades, just a comment there that these are on hold. Stormwater, Leicester flood bypass, yeah, we'll sort of all get up ready to get into that. So there's some potential delays. However, once lockdown ceases, we'll be able to get onto that work without too much delay. In Horata, a number of fences which were causing obstructions to waterways have been now turned into fence gates, so that when we have debris and other bits and pieces lined up against the fence, they'll swing open and the water can flow through unimpeded. Land drainage, currently annual drain cleaning is on hold. Contractors are, however, on call for any emergency works or blockages to resolve those. And we hope to re-establish our teams on site as soon as this lockdown is over. Water races, the only new comment I have there is with the Melbourne Federated Farmers who've been in contact. There's a desire to close a number of races in the Melbourne area, and council staff will be in communication with them over the next little while. COVID-19, there's a lot of talk about that obviously at the moment. Our contractor Cycon has done a sterling job. They actually started to reduce staff contact with ours well before the shutdown, and operating their teams efficiently to make sure that our water services are provided to the level of standard that we have come accustomed to. So I think this needs to be a shout out to our contractors. We're sitting here in our comfy homes, but they're out there carrying on doing the hard yards for us. So our gratitude goes out to them. Resources, we talked about Elaine. It's great to have her on board, be it sort of part at the moment. And there's 2 new roles at the moment in the draft annual plan, which will be a conversation later on today, no doubt. At the last meeting, there was a request for some further points for discussion. And we haven't had time to address those, but these are the points we thought we'll put in this report so we don't lose track of that. But there's 3 matters that we'll try and cover over the next few months. And at the end of this presentation, if there's any other matters you'd like us to address, we're happy to add those to that list. So I'll go back, hand it over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Murray. We'll just run through water, wastewater, stormwater, land drainage and water races if there's any questions on any of those. So first of all, on water, Councillor Hassan.
No, mine's on water races.
Anyone else on water?
Yes, Sam.
Councillor Alexander.
First of all, thank you guys for a great report. With respect to water leakages, while we may be in that top group, it doesn't mean we should sit on our laurels. We need to still keep chasing those leaks where feasible. At the end of the day, they're costing money, literally going down the drain or going to the ground, and we need to chase that. But the second question I have actually comes out of the answer to the questions I had about the chlorination of the Kuwi water supply, where one of the answers indicates the level of testing has been reduced to weekly. Is this indicative across the district, or is this just with respect to this water supply? Are we still testing our major urban water supplies more frequently than weekly?
Yes. So, here we go. Oh, well, I was just going to say, the drinking water standard sets out the frequency in which water supplies need to be tested, and that's based on the source of water, but also the population size. So Kuwi has been tested as required. We had brought the testing to be a more frequent amount just while we're determining what the cause of total coliforms was. But with the outbreak and the shutdown, we've now reverted back to typical testing and put temporary chlorination in. And the reason for that is just because we want to try and limit how much our staff are out and about. And if we can reduce our drinking water assessors, our water samplers, I should say, then that's what we wanted to do.
Any further questions around water, potable water, wastewater? Murray, I guess comments around Selwyn huts, and it's great to know that we got that extension through in time, because the end of that consent is fast running out, and we were under a bit of pressure there. I guess my question is around the trucking and being able to remove the excess there. Obviously, we need to do that to stay and remain within our consent conditions. We just need to ensure that, you know, we are talking about a medium-term arrangement for that community. And I know every time this comes up, we do talk about it, but the solution for that community around a new system is still to provide some medium-term certainty, not long-term certainty around the future of the huts. And it is to enable them to stay there and for that community to continue to exist in what is a very sensitive area, both environmentally and culturally around the lake. And I'm guessing that we will still be, during this lockdown, progressing the design and some of the detail that's going to be needed for what that new system is going to look like, so that in the 2 years that we've got to get it implemented, we'll be ready to hit the ground running as soon as we get out of lockdown.
Yep, no, you can rest assured that we're using this time of lockdown for our benefit. Consultants are crying out for work, and our consultants are working on all projects, and Upper Sound Huts included in that.
Thank you. And around the Three Waters review, the government's been quite clear when it's been asking for shovel-ready projects that it wants things that still meet its environmental and social outcomes, that the agenda of the government hasn't changed, and this isn't just about finding any old project, it's finding projects that align with priorities. The Three Waters review work that the government's been pushing for the last, well, through this term, certainly means that there's going to be, there may be some projects that fit in that Three Waters space that we might be able to take advantage of, and ensuring that we are able to put our best foot forward in that Three Waters space, I think is important. Also, a continuation of communication with our neighbours and understanding what does a Canterbury water supply, what does a North Canterbury water supply, what might that change look like? Because as soon as COVID is done, well, as soon as it becomes slightly more manageable, should I say, the government is going to still want to continue with the work streams that they've been pushing pretty hard on, and the Three Waters review was a key part of that. So just wanting to know whether we are still working with our neighbours on understanding how that might look, how we might be able to implement our own solution, because I don't want the government to be determining what our outcome is for water supplies, wastewater, stormwater in Selwyn. Murray Washington, you might have a comment.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. It was included in the report. The Canterbury councils have agreed to combine their application to the DIA and also to incorporate the West Coast in terms of that consideration. The reason being is that if the regional council model is chosen, that's unlikely to go ahead, because some of those smaller regions would struggle to be viable. So we're looking at a package big enough to meet the requirements of the government, which has been indicated looking to be the Super Rugby region, so 5, maximum say 5 around the country. Now that's not necessarily what this council or other councils actually desire. It's a reflection of the requirements to put an application to consider. So we're very early days. As I said, we have not had any feedback at all on how the DIA are handling and looking at those applications. But be fair to say, anything smaller than regional wide probably won't get looked at all as well. I have seen that in terms of the legislative program, and given that it's a very short period of time before the election, that water reforms may be something that may slip a bit in terms of timing. But we certainly haven't slipped, but we are unable to proceed at the moment until we get some inkling as to whether our application has been successful or is likely to be successful.
Great, thank you for that reassurance, Murray. Any further comments on wastewater, stormwater? Land drainage?
Yes, Sam. Oh, not
And then
land
Murray.
drainage, the next one. Sorry.
Land drainage, Murray?
Yeah, just clarification, Sam, and following up on my email, and just that we keep the pressure on there through the mayoral forum, as you have. Thank you for doing that. That it is an essential service, and I'm sure the people who are affected by the inability for land drainage to be done in a timely manner will appreciate the fact that we've made that effort on their behalf. So we just, commend you to keep that pressure up through the mayoral forum and through the central government to make that an essential service. Thank you.
We will do that, Murray, and it only takes a little bit of rain in parts of our country that have got, different soil types for that to become a massive flooding problem and add to everyone's issues straight away. So that's certainly something the Canterbury Mayoral Forum is pushing. Thanks for that. And the last one is water races. Deborah Hassan.
Yes. Look, I'm just interested to know whether the Melbourne Federated Farmers are aware that we have a strategic plan in place for water race closures and looking at their biodiversity values. I just wonder, we are paying every ratepayer a $20 public good, which is in our long-term plan continuously increasing to recognise the biodiversity values of our water races. Just with regards to that, has there been any work, further work being done on looking at our strategic biodiversity plan in this area?
So I can say that any race closures will be coming to council for approval prior to closing. So there's always that backstop. In terms of what strategic races are, the Federated Farmers, that will be part of our discussion with them for sure. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Murray. Any further questions on water? Do I have a mover and seconder to receive this report? Councillor Reid, Councillor McInnes. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against, please raise your hand. Declare it carried.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Murray and Murray. The next item is item number 9, and it's a consideration of the content of Council's draft annual plan. There was a paper sent out last night or yesterday afternoon around this, giving us a little bit of direction around what we might be able to discuss today to provide certainty for our residents going forward. David Ward, I'll hand over to you to lead us through this paper.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And I think this discussion is indicative of how fast we've moved over the past 2 weeks. You'll recall a fortnight ago at the council meeting, we adopted our draft annual plan for consultation, very, very happy with the content after what had been some very robust discussions that had taken place in the 3 months or so leading up. And before I speak to the report, Mr. Mayor, I just want to make a cautionary comment, and that is that the situation of today that is potentially going to dictate some of the views will be entirely different from the situation in 2 months' time when we actually come to deliberate on the plan that we're going to adopt. The report itself focuses on 3 key areas, which I'll talk to briefly and then respond to questions. But first one is review of key projects. Second one is a consideration of rating increase options. And the third part is ratepayer assistance options that we might wish to consider. And the premise is that we will take the plan out for consultation at the end of this month of April. So my recommendations, firstly, with respect to the review of key projects, are that we consider each of those projects contained within the plan and consultation document, particularly asking, are these still a priority in light of the changing economic scenario? Is the capacity still there to enable us to proceed with each of these projects, both from an internal capacity perspective and also an external contractor's perspective, and also how that deferral may impact financially on council and on the community. And we're also mindful that there are a number of projects already underway and we must commit to ensuring that these are completed. And when I say underway, not only at the construction stage, but very close to final adoption of design. One of the projects that I've identified in the report that I think we probably need to have a look at is the Rolleston Town Centre retail project for reasons that were articulated before, Mr Mayor, and that is with regard to the uncertainty around the retail sector going forward, and whether maybe just putting this or discussion on this project on hold for a 12-month period might actually give us the opportunity to further focus on some of the other projects that we're looking at. We're also looking at, as I said before, compiling a list of shovel-ready projects, depending on how they may be defined, and Selwyn Huts is one that has been raised under that banner. Second area is with respect to rating increase options. So we remind ourselves that 2 weeks ago we adopted a draft plan for consultation, which proposed a rating increase of 3.5%. And that was quite a bit below what our long-term plan had proposed for the next financial year. In dollar terms, that requires additional rating revenue of $2.4 million, and the key drivers for that are costs associated with the construction of some of our projects, resourcing costs within the organisation, and CPI. But of course, the events of the last 2 weeks have seen a lot of pressure being put on the sector to vary rating increases. 0% rating increases, the popular number that's thrown around. And whilst it would be nice to say, yeah, that is a number, we just need to remind ourselves that local authorities encompass a wide range of services across communities, and also we are a significant contributor to local businesses, to local employment, and we have a huge role in the reinvigoration of our local economy post-COVID. I, as you were, attached to the paper that I've sent out are some options that we might consider for rating increase for next year. They refer to 0% rating increase, talk about freezing rates and implementing matching costs and adjusting rate increases with an average increase of 0. And that's not an exclusive list, of course, there are variations to that. It would not, in my view, be unreasonable for council to ask myself as your CEO to lead a review of potential savings within the budget that is proposed over the next couple of weeks and report back at a later date. At this stage, there'll be no changes proposed to the draft budgets because of the quite swiftly moving scenarios. And equally, I'm aware that we will incur additional costs from the introduction of some of the initiatives that I'm just about to refer to. Also need to be aware that a low or a 0 rate increase may well lead to larger increases in subsequent years as we catch up on projects and activities. So that needs to be factored into the outcome to any discussion. We also attached to the paper that was circulated yesterday a number of options that could be considered to provide assistance to either individuals or businesses who will be exposed to significant financial hardship through the impact of COVID-19, and that's through loss of wages or loss of revenue for those businesses. We attached, as you were, we identified half a dozen things, and in the recommendations to this report have suggested 3 packages that ratepayers may be interested in receiving. First one is a commitment to reduce the penalty for late payment of rates from 10% down to 3%. I would advise against going to 0, because if you're going to do that, you just might as well strike the whole penalty thing, put a line through the whole penalty thing. So that you can understand the financial implications of introducing this package. Currently, in round numbers, we receive $500,000 a year in penalties. So thus, if we reduce the penalty down to 3%, we would expect to receive 150,000, or more importantly, we would be sacrificing potential revenue of $350,000. Also talked about an extended period without penalty for ratepayers to enter into an agreed direct debit payment plan, and also an extended rating period through to December 2022. So that provides effectively 30 months for ratepayers to pay the next 24 months rates if they are eligible through wage subsidy schemes, or can show that they've lost 20% or more of their income from sources, and that they have agreed to enter into the direct payment plan for that period. Also in the paper, Mr. Mayor, I've put some holding statements with respect to consultation. As I said at the outset, it is intended that consultation will commence in late April, finish late May, and there will be plenty of time through the month of June for Council to receive and deliberate on any submissions. The advice that we have received nationally is that if, as a result of the Covert lockdown, consultation means late adoption, we will not be penalised in terms of being able to levy a legitimate rate for the 2020-21 financial year. The other thing, of course, with consultation is if we are in lockdown, then consultation processes are somewhat limited. You know, printers won't be there to print booklets, for example. We have asked at national level whether electronic consultation is sufficient, and unfortunately been advised that no, that is not the case. We will need to go a wee bit beyond that. I've also made comments referring to the economic recovery plan that you yourself talked to in your opening address, Mr. Mayor, and also the fact that we need to be cognizant of development of our long-term plan as we go through any discussions on the proposals that we've got in front of us today. So I'll pause at this point. The purpose of the report is to allow us to review what we adopted 2 weeks ago, ask ourselves, are we still comfortable for that document to go out, or do we want to make any variations? If we do make any variations, we've given ourselves an option with recommendation G to bring some comments back to the council meeting of April 15, next Wednesday. But again, finish with my comment that this is an evolving situation, and in 2 months scenario will be quite significantly different, and we'll be facing different pressures or opportunities from those that we are now. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, David, and thank you for bringing this before us and the work that staff have done in quite a short time frame to turn around and bring some options to us for discussion today. We do need to remember that this is about a draft for consultation. This isn't deciding today what the outcome will be. It's about putting some options in front of our community to hear what they want. And we're not actually formally accepting the draft annual plan to go out to consultation today either. Today's discussion is to clarify the thought of our council, to provide staff with that clarity so that they can bring back a document to us for adoption in the next couple of weeks. And although the timeframes from central government they've sort of given us a wee bit of a relax, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to meet the timeframes in legislation, and that we would be consulting on this through May, making decisions in June, ready for the adoption of the actual annual plan before the end of June for implementation at the start of July. So considering that's a draft, I do want to hear from our community on this. I want to hear what they have to say. And we need to remember that we are representatives of our community, and we sit around this table as those representatives to make decisions on their behalf. And so I'm approaching this from a what do I think that the community expects from us as a council, and having that in the forefront of my mind. And I do think that completing the currently started projects, the projects that are halfway through, the projects that are nearly done, the completion of those really does need to be at the front of our minds, and ensuring that we can do that over the next 12 months is very important. But I do think that there's some cautionary notes from our community as well, and feedback around this has been a chance for everyone to take a breath, and I think there's a chance for our council to take a bit of a breath as well. We've been running, sprinting really, for a number of years now. Our growth has meant that we've needed to do that, and that has been the appropriate response to the situation we've found ourselves in. But COVID at the moment just gives us a chance to say, Is this still the right thing to be doing? And in lots of cases, I think the answer will be yes. But I do think it's important that we ask the question. When we think about the impact of COVID, it also needs to not just think about the community as a whole, but different sections of our community too. Who were the hardest hit? Families and businesses particularly, and their ability, albeit to access government support and to maintain employment through this time, but council's costs to them are significant, particularly for some of the, for our larger landholders and for our bigger businesses as well, who are unable to access government support. There will be a future cost if we were to adopt a 0% rates increase for next year, and I do think that we should do that. There is a future cost to that, but it's a future cost that we're not asking a new council to try and make amends for. It's a future cost that we need to understand ourselves and that we can take responsibility for in our long-term planning, which will begin as soon as this is adopted through the next 12 months for approval next year. So we are in control of our destiny around what we decide here. And if it's a 0, a 1, a 2, or a 3, 3.5 was we were at 2 weeks ago, we are the ones that then are faced with the challenges of what that means for us in 2021 through 2031. And our LTP next year will be a full review. And as I said in my opening statements, I don't think that that should just be a, where did we think we would be? Are there any changes? I think it should be built from the ground up, long-term plan, asking all of those in our community who want to be a part of telling us what the future of Selwyn should look like, to give their input from the beginning, in much the same way that our area plan work did around planning, and we've also done through our district plan review, the pre-consultation consultation, having the discussions with community groups and those affected, and building the plan from there. And I think that there are examples of other councils who have done their long-term planning in that way, and we need to look for those. And it might not be within New Zealand, but there will be international examples as well as how we might do our long-term planning a bit differently. I think that Rolleston Town Centre needs to continue, but I think we do need to think about what our involvement in that is going to be. Our LTP is going to allow us a chance to understand with more certainty what the retail sector looks like, and also what other parties' appetite might be for a significant investment from them. We were at the moment with the current draft, we were thinking a $30 million investment for ourselves, but there was going to be more than that, significantly more than that, invested by other parties, or needed to be invested by other parties, and so we're going to need to assess where that sits. The other thing I've been wondering about is possible government support around that sort of size project. There's going to be a huge amount of employment created in the construction phase, and another lot of employment created in the once the shops are open and once the facilities are open. And actually, I think that there's a discussion that needs to be had. It's not shovel ready at the moment, but we should be looking at how this fits in with government priorities. As I said earlier, we need to focus on completing our already started projects. I think our water upgrades are important, and they're already in there. There were some initial cost increases that Murray Washington and Murray England had put to us. So I don't think that that work should stop, and it is going to mean that if we don't increase the rates there this year, there may be more of a jump next year. Our current plans through the long-term plan as we had it though was for about 3% increases for the next 7 years. So we've come off a time when we've been having 7% year on year, almost for as long, well, for the last 10 years. It's almost sat in that space. And during our adoption of the current long-term plan, we said we wanted to sit at 3s for the foreseeable future and the 7 to come. So that is going to be up for discussion. But if we just have to remember that if we were to drop 3 this year, over what time period would we look to catch that 3 back up if we were going to stick with what was there? I think Darfield Wastewater also is another project for possible government investment. There is major implications long-term for our environment and environmental outcomes that aren't measurable at the moment and aren't the trigger for doing this project. There are also social outcomes around businesses in the town being able to develop their business without having to operate their own sewage treatment plant out the back of their building and having to acquire enough land to do that. So socially, there are some changes that I think fit within government priorities as well. and we need to be able to do that. And I think that our consultation with the Darfield community needs to include what's already in the plan around the town centre and new development, but should also mention that if we can get government support for this, cost was really the only reason why we hadn't had a greater conversation sooner. And if the costs are going to be met by other parties and partners to get that outcome, then then we would actually, I think we need to consider bringing that project forward from where we are now. As I said earlier, the government does want to align this stuff with the current environment and social outcomes, as well as being financially viable and returning for employment, but it's not just a single bottom line answer on these things. Financially, we do need to help people pay their rates, and I like that the support package that we've come up with has got a few different bows to it. I do think that we need to think about capitalisation of people's properties into rates, and that was one of the options that has been put in the paper. It's not something that's in the current resolution, and actually setting that up is probably a little bit more difficult than coming up with a way to make it work over the next month. But I do think that that should be part of our long-term plan discussion, because we have a number of families that live in Selwyn who are asset rich and cash poor, and paying rates can be quite difficult. Some of that is landholders, some of that is elderly, people who have invested in homes, and actually getting money out of those things can be difficult. And maybe as a council, we've got a part to play in, and they've been a different way to pay. I don't think that's the discussion. Well, for me, I don't think that's a strong push for today, but I do think that it's something that over the next 12 months we should look to discuss, and through the long-term plan process have other ways of people being able to meet their rates demand. Those are my initial thoughts on where we're at. And I know that there are other councillors who want to speak, and perhaps everyone wants to talk on this. So if you raise your hand, I'll get to you and try not to miss anyone out. So I've got Councillor Bland and then Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, thanks, Sam and David. Yeah, everything you've said really, I think, resonates well with certainly with me. One of the things that I was thinking perhaps in a more pragmatic way was the reason we're asking or even considering the fact that we should be lowering or not putting up our rates is for the fact that because of COVID-19, pressure has come on our Selwyn residents, perhaps because their business is not as economic now, or the future looks a little bit bleak for it. And all the people that worked for those businesses may well feel vulnerable because they're a bit worried about their, the boss not being able to continue, and maybe even already they've been told that they won't have a job in the future. So to me, the problem seems to me to be work and businesses, probably before rates, because as I said, they can't pay their rates because they don't have a job or a business. So what I see is that we need to have a change of philosophy as a council about our procurement policies. And also we need to really start thinking Selwyn. And I have mentioned this earlier. And for instance, if we shouldn't be knocking our projects on the head, because I think that our community really need us to, in a lot of ways, to be going with them. For instance, just in a simplistic manner, if we have a painter out there that's hasn't got a job, maybe we have facilities here that need to be painted. And just simply, there's a job for somebody. If we have drain layers, people that in pest control, spiders, anything. If we need something done of any of our facilities, now's the time to be getting to our community and saying, here's some work for you. For instance, I heard the Chief Executive Officer say that our long-term plan hasn't gone to the printers. Will we be engaging a local printer to do that, or will we be sending it out, as we have done in the past, to a printer perhaps not in Selwyn, because we may get it slightly cheaper? I think if we are seen to be doing the best for our community and not farming out for financial gain to the council, a builder may want to start building houses. Maybe we need to be a little bit flexible and less bureaucratic so they can get onto it a little bit quicker. The non-payment of rates is because people are financially vulnerable. We really need to focus on that more than anything. I don't have a problem myself with a non-rate increase, but I think our focus is slightly askew. We've really got to start thinking Selwyn. We've got to start thinking buy local. We've got to start thinking if we've got contractors here that are capable of aligning themselves up with another contracting firm, perhaps even our own company, Sycon, we've got to start using them so that our base of workforce becomes strong, and then we won't have to worry about them non-payment of rates because they'll have an income coming in. And I really do think we need to turn that around. But thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. I think we also need to consider the dollars, not just the percentages. If you actually look at our draft annual plan that we agreed to a fortnight ago, the biggest urban ratepayer increase was $121 a year, less than $2.50 a week. So when we talk about cutting to a zero rate increase, we are potentially cutting a lot of work that needs doing or loan funding it to save the average urban property less than $2.50 a week. So put that in, it puts it into context. For the urban ratepayer, the average increase would not have been that large. 34% of our budget is spent on transportation and roading. As has already been mentioned, we are overspent in roading. We're not doing enough. So there's surely no cuts to be made there. The historical reason, Sam, for our level of rate increases is underinvestment by previous councils. Let's not fall down that rabbit hole for the sake of relatively minor savings. Looking at the report in front of us, I find clauses D and E contradictory. And in fact, I'll foreshadow that I have an amendment for clause E. We talk about continuing with all other spending plans, and yet we talk about freezing rates. That doesn't sound prudent to me. I would accept a rate decrease that matches identified savings. To freeze rates without knowing the level of savings suggests we're either going to borrow more or have an unbalanced budget. That's not prudent on behalf of our council. Clause H, where we're talking about individualised payment plans for ratepayers. Who will pay the increase in this, the increased cost of these? The district ratepayers or the individualised ratepayers? The report was silent on that. Page 3, where we say council may also want to give consideration to how it may invest additional funds into essential services such as increased roading maintenance. If we're having a zero rate increase, this has clearly got to be loan funded, which shifts the burden of payment from today's ratepayer to tomorrow's ratepayer. I agree with the postponement of physical works on the Rolleston Town Centre, but I don't agree that we should stop planning for it. There will be an economic downturn and probably a retail downturn, and a delay on the town centre is prudent. Despite what you say, Sam, I do not believe that the Darfield wastewater system is a shovel-ready project. We've not finished the consultation. There's been no design. There is no consenting. I do not believe that it is prudent to rush it forward on the optimistic hope there might be some government funding. On item 5, the rating increase options, there's at least one option missing. That's a rate increase of somewhere between 0 and 3.5%, matching the identified costs in council expenditure. I think it would be prudent, perhaps, to have a 2% rate increase if we have a matching 1.5% decrease in expenses. Let me just, we talk about on page 5, the bottom of page 5, economic recovery plan. Again, in a zero rate increase budget, how is this to be funded? A rates freeze shifts increases in expenditure from today's ratepayer to the future ratepayers. That's actually not a principle for operating expenses that we've used in this council. Even in the earthquake years, we did not do that. So on principle, I would struggle to support that. On page 8, we're talking about options. We talk about a potential deferment of water quality improvements. Again, I don't think that's prudent. I think this program we have of water quality improvements is actually essential, if not vital, for our district, and should be continued and continue to be funded. So as I said, I think there is one missing option. That is a rate, option 5, a rate of increase somewhere between 0 and 3.5%, matching identified cost savings. And after everybody else has had a chance to speak, Sam, I have an amendment that I would propose for clause 5, and I would also ask that these clauses be voted on, not on whole, but clause by clause. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. David, you're taking notes of the questions that have been asked, and we'll come to you at the end rather than answering them piece by piece. But my understanding that we would, the 2.4 million increase that we would be foregoing at 0%, once you take away the savings that we're asking the Chief Executive to find, would be loan funded. And that's money we're going to have to borrow, and over what period of time we pay that back will be determined through the long-term plan discussions, which we're going to have over the next 12 months. So you're right, Mark, it does have to be found somewhere, and David will explain at the very end if there's any difference to that. Any further councillors like to have a say today? Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, thanks, Sam and David, for your report. Look, it's been reasonably well summated. This is a snapshot in time. It's a dynamic situation, and we're yet to know the impact of lockdown and recession, or the impacts of our non-related income, as I discussed before, and in Greg's report, the dividends, consents, and facilities income. Interest rates could change, the ability of our contractors to complete contracts, etc. So this, as you summated, Sam, is a consultation document, not the final decision. And the passage of time will give us a better understanding of the global and regional impact and central government's response. At present, they've been supporting wages and businesses to enable business as usual. We're not aware yet of where they will land as far as supporting local government and our incomes. That could yet to be to come. To me, the LTP will be the vital document a year on from now. This is to some degree a holding pattern, and I've got great confidence in our community that they'll engage and inform us of the ultimate decision. I think we will ultimately hear from them about whether they want to defer costs to a future plan, long-term plan, or whether they're happy to retain our rate. So from a consultation point of view, this is the best place. That's not saying I agree with everything that's on this sheet of paper, but I think there's enough detail here now that we can go out to consult on this, and we'll get the feedback and hear our submissions and make a value judgment based upon what we get feedback from our community.
Thanks, Murray. Any further councillors? Councillor Hassan.
Yes, look, I tend to agree with Councillor Lemon. This is just a snapshot in time. Look, we don't know what's going to happen in the future with regards to the interest rates. We don't even know what's going to happen with regards to our next revaluation schedule, which means that a decrease in house prices or capital values means a decrease in rates. It doesn't necessarily follow on that you're going to have a decrease in the cost of some of the infrastructure. I think we do have to have a discussion on what are the nice to haves and what are essential services, and where we actually look at the risk analysis, process. So I'm quite happy with what we're putting out to consultation. I actually appreciate the work that's gone on by staff to actually come up with these solutions, given that they are only for a 12-month period when we actually look at our next 10-year budgeting process. I think we have to be seen to cut our cloth to what the circumstances are at the current time. When we come to deliberate, I can see that a whole lot of issues may change again with regards to this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid.
Thanks for that, all this work that's been done. I concur with Jeff on the try and buy Selwyn, although at times it's quite difficult to distinguish what is a Selwyn business from others to support our local, try and support our local economy. And I also second what Councillor Lemon and Councillor Hassan have said. My concern is we have a lot of families, we have a lot of other vulnerable members of our population who we really don't know what situation they're going to be in, and we don't want to be seen as the council who goes around with the big stick to get. We do need to be able to fund what we are doing as a council, but we also need to be sympathetic to what is our ratepayers and what they're able to afford. And so I think it's good that we are looking at all these different options, and this is a draft package that has to go out, and we really do need to hear what others are saying and come back to us. And Councillor Hassan is quite correct that we have no idea where we're going to end up. We don't know even in 2 weeks' time whether we'll still be in lockdown or what the story is. These are very unusual times, and we need to be thinking broadly about how we going forward, and just be open to any options that are out there and thinking long term for the best for our ratepayers and our district.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I'm also aware that we've gone past the 2-hour mark of this meeting, and our standing orders suggest that we should move a motion to continue the meeting beyond 2 hours. So just at this point, is someone willing to move? Well, I'll move that we continue, and seconded Deputy Mayor Lyle, that we continue with the meeting and don't take a break. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you. We'll continue on with this. We will take a break at the end of the public portion of the meeting, and this is the last paper on that. Any further comments from councillors? Yes, Councillor McInnes.
Sam, I don't know if you could hear me. I'd like to speak if I get the chance.
Oh, Grant. Yep, great. Next, after McInnes.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's done work on this paper as well. It's definitely a hot topic that a lot of people have many thoughts on. On the one hand, we don't want to rush ahead with anything, but on the other hand, we're almost lucky, I feel, that we haven't done our consultation yet. Everything's moving, and people are getting a slightly better idea of what's going on. And even if we don't delay it now, you know, put it this way, if we'd done it a month ago, we'd know far less than we do now. My point was going to be more along the lines of, with the whole nice to haves and the wants and the needs, when it comes down to that, there are a lot of things that council provides, like libraries and such like, that it might look from the outside is a nice to have. I think actually what we're going into is going to make those a must have, because a lot of families are going to have to be looking at what they spend on many discretionary things. Keeping more of the cultural and social stuff going online, particularly if there's, you know, one of the possibilities is some sort of rolling level 2, 3, 4, depending on everything else. So we need to keep more of those sorts of things going and not just cut them because it looks like we don't necessarily need it right now. I definitely agree with deferring the Rolleston Town Centre project. It would be fantastic eventually. Right now is not the right time to be spending that level of money, but that's my personal opinion. And just referring back to Councillor Bland's comment about buying Selwyn and Councillor Reid's mention about how do you define a Selwyn business. Don't also forget that actually quite a lot of our working population work outside of the district. It's great to support local businesses and everything. It may not have quite as much of an impact on families' incomes or residents' incomes as we would like, just because a lot of them work in Christchurch instead. We're not quite sure what's going on. It's such a time of unknown. But yeah, I think we need to go ahead with the consultation. We need to know what people are thinking. Thank you.
And oh no. Councillor Miller. Councillor Miller.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, my apologies for the poor connection, and my video link and computer is very poor today. It's one of those situations where we all agree that a large portion of our population and our ratepayers are going to be significantly affected, but it's also one of those times when we as councillors have to stand and talk about difficult decisions and difficult ways of doing things. And I applaud Mark Alexander for talking about difficult things and really grasping the nettle of, it's very superficial to talk about zero rates increases and all that feel good sort of stuff. But the reality is, when you do these things, someone pays, and the people that get deferred rates, it means that the remainder of ratepayers who pay their rates on time are in effect subsidising them or helping to pay their rates. So a bit of a deeper look would be really helpful about the actual costs of where this falls. Particularly the central government is moving relatively quickly, and I'm talking specifically around clause H3, around having a business guarantee scheme for working capital where they go to their bank. So we need to be pretty careful here. We don't turn into a de facto bank and support a lot of our ratepayers and businesses when traditional banking models are the best way to handle this. I also look at what's proposed in front of us, and it's very, does clause 1 apply to me, clause 2, clause 3, and someone has to apply standards and rights or wrongs and who's going to qualify and who's not. You need a system which is universal, easily understood and easily administered. So my preference, as I've stated before, is a variation of Appendix 2, number 6, where the council or people apply for have their rates placed as a loan from council in effect and pay only the interest portion of that rates burden. And so the council borrows the cash, we continue to have our cash flow, and the ratepayer has an individualised statement and actually pays, I would suggest initially a 3-year term, and pays it as they go. And at the end of that 3-year term, they'll either pay it back or they go into a payment plan. That is clearly defined who is paying for the benefit, and it also gives a clearly defined ability for us to have a universal system of helping our ratepayers. I agree with Sophie that we're looking too narrow. I think it's admirable the comments that Jeff and Nicole make, but it's not a Selwyn problem. This is a New Zealand problem. We've got to support all the businesses within New Zealand. And I think Sophie's dead right. A lot of our ratepayers, they don't just work in Selwyn, they work in Christchurch, Waimakariri, Ashburton. And if you take business from one of those businesses, it just means you're passing the buck somewhere else. So while I say some good effort's been put in here, I would suggest that there's more work to be done here, and especially understanding what central governments, they seem to be changing on a daily basis as to what they are providing in assistance to particularly businesses. So my support is for initially at least Mark's suggestion that only the rates decrease is equivalent to savings, but I think I would certainly suggest that we look more in depth at option number on Appendix 2, number 6, and giving that a really good shape, because I think that's where it'd be a lot more equitable and easy to understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Miller. Councillor Lyle.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Good comments, Grant. Sophie, a point very well made as to the networks and frameworks we're going to need going forward. I do agree with a lot of comments that Mark and Grant have made. I would prefer, with whatever we do, to put a placeholder percentage as a rate rise. This council had 10 years of nil rate rises many years ago, and it's taken us the last 6 or 7 years of 6 and 7% rate rises to grow our rating base to get up to where we are now. Yes, our public are hurting and will continue to hurt. Deferring the payment it's only going to make the pain come a bit later. So maybe not 3.5%, maybe 1.5%, maybe 1%. I would much prefer to see a figure in there than a non-figure. If you consult with the public on a nil rate rise, of course they'll agree with that. It's like a turkey doesn't vote for an early Christmas. People don't like paying rates, fees, and I'm sure that there would be a resounding agreement from people in consultation that we do have a nil rate rise. I'm very concerned as we go forward about the projects we've got at the moment, the force majeure clauses that are in many of them. I do believe the construction industry will come back to us and want to renegotiate some of those projects we've got on our books, and the cost of those may well change. I'm also concerned that we're borrowing money to achieve some of this, and what is the long-term interest rate going to look like in 6 or 12 months' time internationally? These indeed are very interesting times. So it's a great paper. It's well put together, David and team, but it is a consultation document. I would just like to see some of the ideas that Grant has brought forward perhaps looked at as well. That's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lyle. Anyone further?
Oh, Sam, I just neglected to say my little bit about the Rolleston Town Centre. I get where you're coming from with deferring the building, but I still feel we would be remiss in our duty as a council not to do the base infrastructure. And by that I mean the roads, the sewage, the water, the electricity, the internet, so that when conditions do change, the base infrastructure is there and in place for us to start going ahead. We've got a history of doing this. We think back to the earthquake when we had sewage capacity and infrastructure in place to enable our community to get over a major event. I think that's a fundamental plank of our recovery, is that we should have ability to enable our community to move forward, so that base infrastructure should at least be done.
Correct,
I
Grant,
agree.
and I think that's very important for us, along with the reserve and the town square development continuing. What we're really talking about is the physical build of the retail areas. So you're getting get up, I agree, and if you can't see the video, there's nods around the table on that, and that's giving direction to our staff.
You're continuing to lead with infrastructure like we have in the past, most essential.
Yes. Councillor Blanche.
Can you hear me? Yeah. When I said support local businesses, if a business or a person is located in Selwyn, they pay rates to the Selwyn District Council, and this document is about the payment of rates. Businesses in Christchurch, well then rates is not really, it doesn't matter to them, because they will be paying rates to the Christchurch City Council. So when I say that we should be looking after the businesses on this document about rates, if the business is located in Selwyn, we should be looking after them, because that business pays rates to us, as do the people that have their homes here. But just on that argument, I don't quite agree with some of the other comments that have been made. I think we should be looking after our ratepayers, businesses that pay rates, people that pay rates.
Mark and Nicole.
Thank you, Sam. One thing I forgot to suggest earlier, I had on my notes that could the Rolleston Town Centre infrastructure, the in-ground services, roads and car parks, be considered shovel-ready projects for the government's looking for works that we could get on with, because we're pretty well advanced in the planning. I'm not completely sure that we've got all the consents, but they won't be far away. And as Councillor Lyle and Councillor Miller said, progressing the infrastructure gets us ready for the next work, as well as providing good work for those contractors.
Thank you. And Councillor Reid, and then Douglas has got some comments.
I think Grant's made some good points about with payment of the rates, but I primarily also want to second Sophie's comments about where we are looking to cut costs, and there are some areas such as libraries, as she has said, that also have a big wellbeing factor to them, which I have lettered on about in the past, and that's very, very important to be mindful of those sorts of things in this time.
Thank you, David. I'll get you to round up the discussion at the end, but Douglas had joined us, and Douglas, probably on Town Centre, I'm guessing you're wanting just to add in some comments.
Thank you, Worship. I think it's the comment on the retail area. Clearly there are challenges, so it's understood why we just need to pause on that. But as David says in his report, we should continue to talk because opportunities will arise out of this. But I just wanted to confirm, as you know, we've got contracts underway for Tennyson Street upgrade. We can also do car parks. We've got civil works, water, sewer, internet, all that type of stuff is included. We've also got money to start working on reserve, the development of the reserve around the tennis court and between the town centre, and also we've got the town square side of things. So even if the retail is tricky to get away over the next wee while, what we will demonstrate, as a couple have said, is the infrastructure around the retail commercial will be developed. And one of our concerns has always been that we would have, I'll use the word a bit unfortunately, but bomb site for many years. Well, actually, no, we'll get a lot of that core public realm infrastructure in over the next couple of years. I think the key thing is if we want to see this as a shovel-ready project, that's what we can demonstrate. So thank you.
Thanks, Douglas. I'll hand back to David, and if you can answer any of the questions that have been asked, summarise where we're at, and then as Councillor Alexander has requested, we'll go through it clause by clause, and there's an amendment foreshadowed in E. Thank you.
Okay, so we just remind ourselves of the purpose that this report was written. And that was twofold. The first one is in response to an increasing number of questions, we have considered a review of the rating level. The suggestion was, is your rating proposed level appropriate? Should it be 0? And we've canvassed that quite well today. The second part was to give flexibility to those people who will be suffering financially as a result of the lockdown period. That may be individuals, or it may be businesses in terms of paying their rates. And bear in mind, there are a number of services that businesses will be paying for in addition to rates. So if we can offer that opportunity, so be it. I actually think, Mr. Mayor, that we've answered the call and answered it pretty clearly. With respect to the support package for ratepayers, I'm generally hearing support for those, with the addition of option 6 that Grant referred to, and I think it'll be pretty easy to actually put those into place. The answer, Mark, to your question, with respect to the reduction in penalties, that cost would of course be met by everybody. But with respect to putting the other processes in place, that cost would be met by the applicant themselves. That's the only way that would be, because that's a personal scenario. If you have a look at the recommendations in front of us, Mr. Mayor, and take A and B, and we've done that successfully today, we've received the report and we've agreed to place on hold consultation pending the review. I think today we've done the review, and what I'm hearing from councillors is that we're comfortable with what we've got. We know that the situation is changing, and what I'm hearing is, with a few crafted words at the front, at the introduction to the consultation document, is that we proceed with the content that we have got. Concurrent to that consultation process, I and staff will look at savings that can be affected. And Mark, this comes back to your point to say, is it 0, is it 3.5, or is it something that matches cost savings that we can genuinely introduce? We're also aware that there will be increased costs operating, not only for us, but for all businesses, as a result of, in some cases, reduction in services, or things like air travel, for example, I think is probably going to be more expensive. I know we don't do a lot of it, but there are a lot of drivers for that. So on reflection, I'm comfortable with the report, very comfortable, and the reasons that it was written, comfortable with the discussion. and see that with respect to A and B we've achieved. With respect to C, D, E, and E, F, and G, we probably don't need to do anything else because that will be responded to in the deliberation discussion. And for next week's council meeting, we just polish up H a wee bit because that's really nothing to do with the consultation or the draft annual plan process. Rather, that's a potential financial hardship process. Happy to answer any other questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. On that, I think that E and the outcome of freezing rates would need some good explanation in the consultation document so people understand what that means for either future years rates or reductions in services based on their feedback to us. So the signal would be in the documentation where we sit with that, but people need to clearly understand if you choose this or if we go down this line, then this is the outcome and we take ownership for the decision that we're making. And as has been said, many years of catch up for many years of zeros. I don't think anyone here is saying that there's going to be many years of zeros. This is in response to unprecedented times and wanting to come up with something in the short term that gets people, businesses across the line who are currently facing hardship. So I know, Mark, you were thinking about an amendment to something in there. If we take them item by item,
Sam, I think procedurally we need to consider the amendment prior to doing clause by clause because it does affect other clauses. I would prefer to be able to move my amendment. It may not be seconded, so it may be moot, but prefer to move it prior to moving any of the other clauses.
Okay, talk about it now, Mark.
The amendment I propose is a minor amendment to clause E that changes the emphasis. My amendment is that the word freezes is changed to consider freezing. The difference in emphasis is, as it stands, the clause E is very directive. It says and it indicates we're going to freeze the rates at this year's level. Our discussion, and certainly there has been some support for matching the rates decrease with the savings identified by the chief executive. Changing the words to consider freezing indicates where we'd like to go, but also allows us a little more wiggle room, if you like, in the future. If we don't arrive at a zero, if we arrive at 1, 1.5, 2, wherever it may be, we've considered it, but found it impractical. Whereas as it currently stands, it's much more directive to the chief executive and what report may come back to us. So my amendment is those wording change.
Thank you. And we don't actually need an amendment because it hasn't been moved or seconded. So if you're happy to move that, I'll second it. And we can have some discussion on the items and we'll move through A through H. That we received the report. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against, please raise your hand. Declare it carried. B, agrees to place on hold the consultation of previously adopted draft consultation document pending this review. In favour, please raise your hand. Against, please raise your hand. Or speak up, Grant, if sorry, I can't see your hand. C, it defers major investment in the Rolleston Town Centre resale project to the 2021-2031 long-term plan. Please raise your hand in favour. Thank you. Raise your hands against. Declare that carried.
So Sam, understanding that means the retail sector and not the underground infrastructure.
Yes, and retail is part of that motion. D, continues with all other spending plans identified in the adopted 2020-2021 draft annual plan. All in favour, please raise your hand. Against, please raise your hand. Declare that carried as well. E, consider freezing rates at the 2019-2020 level and request the Chief Executive to explore saving and efficiency options. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against, please raise your hand. Declare that carried. F, reviews the draft 2021, that should be 2020-2021 draft annual plan consultation document in line with today's decision for distribution to the community. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against, please raise your hand. Declare that carried. G, receives amended content to its 2020-2021 draft annual plan for adopting at its 15th of April meeting this year. Again, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Against, please raise your hand. Declare that carried. And H is, I won't read through, well, no, I won't read through it, but there's also a 4 that's in there. If Mark, so I should have said that at the beginning, Mark, if you're happy to move out and me as a seconder will include that in, which is around the inclusion of what Grant spoke about, which is Appendix 2, Item 6, I think it is, for inclusion there. Again, if you're in favour of that, please raise your hands.
Just Sam, before we vote on that, it's quite prescriptive, the description. It means we approve that support package. What we're doing is asking the Chief Executive to develop those concepts further, which may or may not and result in one of those coming through, because particularly Clause 3, I think has a lot of difficulty in application and does cross over into the government support package. So I think we're not actually approving that support package, we're approving a consideration of the package, aren't we?
Perhaps
yeah, we're approved.
Changed to
Mr. Gates
approves the development of support packages.
This is still going to be consulted on though, David, Sam. So as long as that's clear in there, that it's not a given now, this is, you know, we're still consulting and we'll have a debate. As long as that's clear to the community, the wording that's been added is fine.
Yeah, the only thing there is this doesn't have to actually be an annual plan. This is a policy that we're developing, and we can do it in consultation with our community, but we could actually just make this decision as well. I agree that it's not mature enough at the moment to just say we totally agree to it. What we're doing is we're giving guidance to council staff that there's 4 options that we want them to consider, and that they would bring that back to us in a much more mature form that we would then be able to approve at a subsequent meeting. And if that's able to happen, Greg, you're online, if you're with us, for the 15th of April meeting, then we can discuss it then, or at a subsequent meeting, depending on your time requirements to get something back to us. Greg?
Yeah, so the Clause 8 was put together as something we could do for ratepayers now and offer some sort of certainty. So in terms of number 1, that is a decision which we made as we adopt the or put through the rates resolution, but that's a commitment to do that in the future. Number 2 is a relatively modest extension, just to allow people to enter into payment agreements without penalties up to the end of the year. Not too difficult a thing. Option 3, as Councillor Miller has indicated, is a bit more challenging. That requires an assessment process, which is why we said it wouldn't be available immediately. That requires a process of similarities there to what has been put in place by Christchurch City Council. So clearly we would talk to them about their process, but that is more challenging. The one that is particularly more difficult is the concept of a postponement policy. The reason for that is because A, it's a very complex area, and B, it requires consultation. So we need to develop a policy, think carefully around that policy. It's not something you can leap to quickly and then go through a consultation process for that. We're not therefore in a position to do that as part of this annual plan, because we haven't actually developed up our draft postponement policy. Typically, a postponement policy is there for those people who have essentially got a large asset, a large house with a reasonable rates bill and little in the way of income or fixed income. What we're seeking to address here is more a short-term issue where people might lose their jobs or have a reduced income for a period of time, a year or two, whereas a postponement policy is really aimed at a quite different challenge. So that requires a lot more thinking about. So it's a question of whether you want to do something for ratepayers now and give some clarity and certainty, or whether you want to go through a longer process and develop a policy which, in essence, is aimed at a different problem.
If Greg, we were able to, sorry, Grant, is that you?
Sorry, it wasn't me. Thank you, Sam.
No.
But yeah.
If Greg, we're able to, if you can develop these further and come back to us around how they could be implemented over what time frame and what consultation would be required, and if we've got the next couple of weeks to be able to do, or the next week to bring that back to the 15th, then we could then consider how and when they might be implemented. And as you say, it might be, I think the discussion that we've had today shows that there is an appetite for item 6 to be included for Selwyn ratepayers. But at what point, as you've said, it might be a long-term plan matter for consultation, or in the interim between now and the long-term plan. But we do need some other things that are available for immediate implementation for ratepayers. And if number 4 is not available to that, we do need to make sure that 1, 2, and 3, given the complexity of 3, that may be something you come back and just give us a bit more advice on. But we do need to do something else in that space. Is for the 15th, that's next meeting. It might be too soon, but what sort of time frame are you able to work with to give us some certainty to go out with the long-term plan?
Yeah, I mean, the 15th will be too soon because in effect this is a deadline of tomorrow because of the Easter break. As I say, numbers 1 and 2 aren't particularly difficult. So it depends on whether you would wish to go ahead with those 2 or hold off. Maybe we could come back with a bit more information on 3 in a couple of weeks' time. As I say, the postponement policy is a different kettle of fish, really.
Thanks, David.
Sam, just before, I'd like to comment on Greg's what he just said.
Yes.
Central government has certainly shown a lot of flexibility in asking us to be flexible, and I think we talk about having to require consultation and all these things. It's certainly a question, perhaps with the mayoral forum, if we develop a concept which we believe is workable, could be pointed up central government and saying, well, you give us the authority to implement on a shorter term basis. Those sort of things are on the table now, in my view, that we can be more innovative and try and provide people with technologies and options. And I think particularly with the option I'm describing in 6, it doesn't have to be just COVID reliant. It could be a part of our rating options into the future as well. So there is a long-term method to what we're suggesting as well.
Yes, I agree, Grant, and that can be, I'll bring that up with the mayoral forum, because I think having some level of consistency across Canterbury in the way that we're approaching this is important. And as has already been noted by Greg and David, what we're proposing here has gathered bits from what Christchurch and Waimakariri have done as well. David, any further comments? And then we're going to vote on H, and then we're taking a break.
Yeah, it was well, it was a bit of a foot race between Greg and I to pretty much say those same things, but just want to come back to the point I made before, is that H is in terms of providing hardship support for our district's ratepayers. A through G can still proceed regardless, and we'll come back on the 22nd with the support packages that we would look to put in place.
Sam, am I still able to speak, or is that finished?
Yes, you may, Grant. Sorry, Grant, we can't hear you.
In our drive to help our ratepayers, we may be inadvertently putting them in a worse position because, say, the average household has a rates bill of $3,500 a year, and we, in our mindset of trying to help them defer it for a year, the following year, of course, their rates bill is $7,000. And it all becomes a lot harder to pay when you get all your debt loaded up, and it all becomes quite front loaded. So the ability for ratepayers to continue to pay at least a portion of their rates, I think, would be helpful to our ratepayers, rather than actually deferring and adding further to their problems. And particularly about business ratepayers, they may find that in 18 months' time that their cash flow is worse, and then we haven't helped them. We've actually made the situation worse.
Yes, that does need to be taken into consideration, and I do think that it's always a good reminder of how switched on our community is when we get submissions to our annual plan or long-term plan, and I think that's going to be no different this time. We always get considered responses, and when people come and even meet us in person, they're always well thought through, and I think that we're gonna see that same sort of response to this package being put through. And it's not about knee-jerk reaction about take up. Businesses and households are going to need to understand, and I hope that, Greg, that will be part of the process that we put them through. If there's going to be any deferral, we certainly check that they've taken advice on what that might look like, and we provide the advice that it's not a wiping of the debts that is a rate that needs to be collected. It's actually going to be manageable for them into the future. So very good points to be raised there. H has been amended to what you can see on the screen. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, please raise your hand. Declare that carried. Thank you for the discussion on that item. We now move to a resolution to exclude the public for the rest of the meeting. Moved Councillor Lyle, seconded Councillor Gallagher. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against, declare it carried. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us in this meeting. If you've been watching online, I hope you've been able to follow the discussion and being able to see on screen the resolutions as they've been put and understand some of the reasoning behind the discussion that we've had today. The time is now 3:51. I'm going to suggest that we take a 20-minute break and come back at 4:10 and resume the meeting in public excluded at that time. It just allows everyone to take a toilet break and grab a cup of tea before coming back. So see you, any public, we'll see you later, and any councillors, we'll see you again in 20 minutes. Thank you.